Shlomi Pearl, Iran is going to have a hard enough time helping itself right now. President Trump just declared economic D-Day on Tehran. He is cutting off their oil, smuggling, their cash lines, and anyone trading with them is about to feel the hammer from the United States. If you follow their logic all the way, a regime that cannot even move its own money without getting crushed is in no position to bail out anyone else. Okay, back to the news. Welcome to the Tom Sense Show right now. We have a loaded broadcast this hour. Trump takes the White House ballroom fight all the way to the Supreme Court. The Florida Democratic machine gets completely blown up by its own voters, and tech giants pour over $100 billion into the American heartland. Drop your questions into the chat on YouTube or over on X at any point during the broadcast. If it is a real question with some teeth, I will take it right here on the air in the middle of the news. Let us get straight into it. The Trump administration is taking a massive battle straight to the Supreme Court of the United States. They filed an emergency petition demanding to restart construction on a $400 million, 90,000 square foot ballroom at the White House. This whole fight kicked off after the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals stepped in with a 2-1 ruling on the 7th of August. That court said tearing down the historic East Wing to build something new requires express permission from Congress under the Property Clause. Solicitor General D. John Sauer hit back immediately in emergency filings. He made it clear to the justices that halting this project interferes with an integrated military complex and vital national security facilities. Meanwhile, the National Trust for Historic Preservation and conservative legal groups filed their responses this week, begging the court to keep the freeze in place. They claim the executive branch is trying to rush the bulldozers to get ahead of the judges. Think about the standard here for 1 second. When the government spends billions turning public buildings into administrative bloat, nobody files an emergency injunction. But the minute someone wants to build a world-class ballroom on executive property to host foreign leaders, suddenly every bureaucrat in town discovers a sacred love for old bricks. The federal government has spent decades treating the entire country like its personal construction site, but a president upgrading the house he actually works in gets treated like a national emergency. If judges had to approve every room renovation in Washington, the entire Capitol would still be lit by candles. Florida Democrats just delivered one of the most stunning primary upsets in recent political memory. Alexander Vindman, the star witness of the first Trump impeachment back in 2019, was supposed to cruise to victory. He had the entire party establishment behind him, glowing cable news coverage, and a campaign war chest of $16 million. Instead, he got completely crushed on Tuesday by State Representative Angie Nixon, who raised under $1 million. Nixon's bare-knuckle grassroots campaign highlighted economic fights, pushed hard against Governor Ron DeSantis in the State House, and formally aligned with the Democratic Socialists of America just weeks before the vote. The resistance establishment spent 5 years turning Vindman into their favorite television hero, paraded him across Sunday morning talk shows, poured millions into his bank account, and the actual voters in his own primary could not stand him. This is what happens when a political party builds its entire identity around cable news talking points instead of the people actually living in the state. Vindman thought repeating Trump impeachment soundbites from 5 years ago would buy him a Senate nomination in the third largest state in the country. The voters showed him that $16 million in establishment checks cannot buy a single real supporter when nobody actually wants what you are selling. If running on Trump hatred alone was a winning strategy in Florida, Alexander Vindman would be throwing a victory party tonight instead of looking at $16 million burned down to zero. The latest now on the Korean peninsula, where North Korea just test-fired a ballistic missile into the sea between the peninsula and Japan early Thursday. This launch happened mere hours after President Donald Trump publicly announced that he plans to hold a brand new in-person summit with Kim Jong-un before the end of the year. Military officials in South Korea and the Japanese defense ministry tracked the entire flight, confirming the missile splashed down safely outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. Pyongyang had already rejected back-channel diplomatic outreach from Washington, even after the United States and South Korea agreed to scale back major joint military exercises. Regional analysts say the regime launched the missile to send an unmistakable signal that Kim will not sit down for a diplomatic photo op without real, substantive relief from international economic sanctions. Everyone knows the routine by now. Whenever Washington offers a polite conversation, Pyongyang launches a rocket into the ocean to demand free money and fewer rules. For years, foreign policy experts told the world that scaling back American military drills would bring peace and calm the region down. Washington and Seoul cut back the exercises, and North Korea fired a missile anyway before the ink was even dry on the schedule. Kim wants sanctions relief, Washington wants leverage, and firing expensive hardware into the water is the only way Pyongyang knows how to say hello. A truly catastrophic weather emergency in Europe this week has claimed a staggering number of lives. Emergency health agencies across the continent report that more than 16,000 excess heat-related deaths occurred in just a single week during an unprecedented late summer heat wave. Temperatures shattered historical records right across southern and central Europe, pushing well past 44 degrees Celsius, which is over 111 degrees Fahrenheit. Spain, Italy, France, and nations across the Balkans bore the brunt of the disaster. Hospital emergency rooms were completely overwhelmed with patients, while local power grids struggled and collapsed under the strain. Public health authorities confirmed that elderly citizens and outdoor workers suffered the vast majority of the casualties. Governments were forced to issue nationwide red alerts and order mandatory cooling breaks for workers as a massive, high-pressure atmospheric dome settled over the region. European climate agencies have now classified this event as one of the deadliest and most intense heat disasters in recorded European history. It is a severe tragedy for thousands of families across the continent, and it exposed deep vulnerabilities in basic infrastructure and emergency medical response. When extreme weather strikes on this scale, power grids and hospital capacity are matter of life and death necessities, and several major European systems simply could not keep up with the crisis. Looking at the YouTube chat, Shlomi Pearl 4946 is asking about Spain. Spain got hit directly by this, with temperatures soaring past 44 degrees Celsius, which is over 111 degrees Fahrenheit. Their hospitals were overwhelmed, and local power grids failed under the strain. Because thousands of people have died across the continent, this is a terrible loss of life. And when basic power grids fail during an emergency, it turns deadly very fast. Right. Where was I? A massive economic announcement landed in the American heartland today. Nvidia has officially signed a commitment to pour up to $105 billion into a colossal artificial intelligence data center in Ohio, which will be leased directly to OpenAI. Shloma Pearl 4946 over on the YouTube stream is asking if that is normal. $105 billion in private cash for a single facility? No, it is not normal. That is historic. But you want to know what is normal? The left panicking the second real money hits the heartland. You have activists and local politicians immediately crying about power grids and carbon targets. For years, they told us the Rust Belt was dead and we had to move on. Now, the biggest tech investment in the history of the country lands right in Ohio, and their first instinct is to ask if it is going to hurt the wind turbines. Follow the logic all the way. If you want the future built in America, you actually have to plug it into the wall. Okay, next up. This is one of the largest private infrastructure investments in the entire history of the United States. The site is designed to house massive compute clusters that will train and run the next generation of frontier artificial intelligence models. While this marks an incredible flood of private capital into domestic tech infrastructure, it is already running into heavy friction on the ground. Regional power utility companies are raising alarms about the sheer amount of electricity this facility will pull from the local grid. Meanwhile, clean energy advocates and local politicians are demanding legally binding promises that the data center will not hike consumer electric bills or derail regional carbon reduction goals. Here you have tech companies dropping more than $100 billion on American soil to build the most advanced compute infrastructure on the planet, and the immediate reaction from local activists is to complain that the servers use too much electricity. Not upset at all. At ShlowMePearl4946 in the YouTube chat, just amazed at the logic. We have companies dropping $105 billion right here in Ohio to build the future of American artificial intelligence, and the green energy crowd is mad because the plugs need electricity. If you want the future built in the United States, you actually have to let people plug the machines into the wall. Let's pick this back up. If you want American companies to dominate global technology instead of outsourcing everything to foreign competitors, you have to actually generate the power to run the machines. You cannot build the digital future on windmills and good intentions. Democratic lawmakers in Northern Virginia have officially launched a congressional investigation into immigration and customs enforcement. Representative Don Beyer is leading the effort, claiming federal agents used aggressive apprehension tactics and warrantless detentions during operations throughout suburban Washington, D.C. The lawmakers are formally demanding that the Department of Homeland Security turn over internal arrest warrants, daily operational logs, and agent disciplinary records. Department officials immediately pushed back against the inquiry. They defended the agency, stating that these were lawful, targeted enforcement operations designed specifically to remove unauthorized non-citizens from the country. This sets up a direct fight between local politicians and the federal government over who gets to enforce immigration law. The plain fact here is that when federal agents actually go out and do the job written into the law, the politicians who represent the suburbs around the Capitol try to put the officers on trial instead. Representative Beyer and his colleagues apparently believe that enforcing federal immigration statutes inside the United States is a civil rights violation against the people breaking them. If Northern Virginia politicians spent half as much time backing law enforcement as they do investigating federal officers for making lawful arrests, the immigration system would actually function. Federal law applies to the suburbs of the Capitol just like it applies everywhere else. That is the for this hour. Stay sharp, speak the truth, and I will see you right back here on the next broadcast.